All right. We're in the book of Judges. If you got your little book that we have, it's like page, 67 we'll be on today. Otherwise, it's Judges chapter 12 if you have a regular Bible. Judges chapter 12 is where we are today. And I've told a story before about my seminary that kind of fits with today's message. I took a class in seminary entitled Genesis. And that class was literally just a class studying the book of Genesis. I've read the book of Genesis. I had to read it once a week for that whole class, so I read it, a dozen times or more over the course of that semester. We went deep dive in it. The professor one day, I may have shared this before, he forgot his Bible, like his New American Standard or English Standard or whatever he has. He reaches into his little bag, pulls out his Hebrew Old Testament, and just randomly translates the book of Genesis on the fly into English. I mean, one of the smartest men I've ever studied under. Ironic, because he was a professional football player before he went into that position. It was David Klingler, if you remember, University of Houston quarterback, would have won the Heisman Trophy if Andre Ware hadn't been the quarterback before him. They didn't want to give it back-to-back, set all sorts of records. I think he led the NCAA in passing yards because they ran the run-and-shoot offense out there, threw for more yards than anyone in history at that time. That record's gone down to, Tommy Chang out there in Hawaii or something since then. But football player drafted in the first round, played for the Cincinnati Bengals, but a brilliant dude. I mean, just like when I saw who was teaching the class, I had a Sega Genesis game called NFL QB Club. And I remember playing that game. You had all sorts of random quarterback drills that you could play. And I would play as David Klingler, and he was just a wildly bad quarterback compared to the other quarterbacks in the game. But I just remember playing with him. And then when I saw he was teaching, I was like, that David Klingler? And sure enough, it was. But he was brilliant, smart, wise man. And for our first class, you get the syllabus right online before the class, and you look at it. And one of the required textbooks had to be fully read before the first class period, which is unnecessary, I will say, for a teacher to do. But it was a relatively short book that I had already read about 100 times before. It was a book called Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. And so when I saw that on the syllabus, I thought, this is ridiculous. But I had small children, and so I went into their books and I read Green Eggs and Ham before class to reacquaint myself with the story of Green Eggs and Ham. I'm going to reacquaint you with the story. Maybe it's been a minute since you read it, so here is the story of Green Eggs and Ham in just a couple of minutes. There's this guy named Sam I Am, and he's running through, and there's a man sitting in a chair who's trying to enjoy a newspaper. And after Sam runs through a couple times, the man in the chair speaks. He has no name, but he says, that Sam I am, I do not like, that Sam I am. And then Sam I Am responds with a plate of green eggs and ham. And he says, well, do you like green eggs and ham? And then he says, no, I don't like them, Sam I Am. I don't like green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am goes through about 1 million different places that you may or may not like green eggs and ham. Here, there, boxes, foxes, houses, mouses, boats, goats, trees, trains, all the places that you might like to eat green eggs and ham. And after every place, in every situation, the unnamed narrator of the story says, I do not want it here or there. I don't want it there. I don't want it in a box. I don't want it with fox. I do not like green eggs and ham. I don't like them. Sam I Am. After all the places have been exhausted, the train that they're on crashes into a boat. It's mass carnage. It would be a tragedy if it was real life. This train crashes into a boat. Sam I Am and the guy are in the water, or some dude with a captain's wheel who's drowning. It's I don't know why we read this to children, right? And Sam I Am says, would you eat them? And he says, no, I'm not going to eat them. And Sam says, try them. Try them and you may. I say, maybe you'll like them if you'll try them. And the man is exhausted, parable of the persistent widow being laid out here before us. And he says, Sam, if you will let me be, I will try them, you will see. And Sam's like, awesome. So he gives him a bite of green eggs. I never see him eat the ham, but he eats a bite of the green eggs, and all of a sudden he's like, I like these. And he says, I would eat them in all the places that I just said I wouldn't eat them. I would eat them anywhere. And the story ends with him and Sam walking away and the man's got probably a plate of green eggs and ham. He says, I do so like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam I am. That's the story of green eggs and ham. If you didn't think you were going to get Dr. Seuss today at church, you were wrong. Right? That's the story of green eggs and ham. And then Dr. Klingler sits us down after we've read this book. He says, how many of you read the book? And most of us raised our hands. And he's like, okay. And he's like, what is the main problem in this book? What's the issue that this book is addressing? And I'm like, okay. And so I raised my hand because I'm not shy. And I'm like, well, this guy doesn't want to try green eggs and ham. And Dr. Klingler is like, wrong. And I was like, dang, Klingler, that's not nice. Like, wrong, that's not right. And so everyone else kind of goes through like, well, maybe it's about and we start getting crazy ideas about, try new things, and maybe it's a commentary on the proletariat. We don't know what it is. What is it? And so we're like, you tell us, Dr. Klingler, since you know all things about Dr. Seuss, what is the problem in this book? And he flips back to page 1 of the book. And you see Sam running through. And the very first word spoken in the book says, that Sam I am, I do not like that Sam I am. The problem in Green Eggs and Ham is this guy doesn't like Sam I am. In the end of the book, after all of the Green Eggs and Ham nonsense happens, that same guy has his arm around Sam I am, and they're walking off as friends, right? And so the main problem in the book is not Green Eggs and Ham. The main problem is that this guy has issues with Sam I am, right? And we're like, okay, good job, Dr. Klingler. Thank you for that. It doesn't help us at all. And then he says something. I guarantee we're going to get to Judges chapter 12 because this applies very well. But he says, guys, we do this with the Bible. We read the Bible, and there's all these details, and there's all these stories, and there's all these things going on inside the stories. In the book of Genesis, there's a million different narratives that take place, and you're going to kind of find yourself following the characters in the story and lose sight of the fact that the story is not about the characters, the story is about God. Right? God is the main character in the Bible. And the story is about God trying to bring redemption to mankind, to buy back mankind from the sin that they entered into in the garden. And so anytime you're interpreting the Bible, anytime you're reading the Bible, in any part of the Bible, right, remember the main character is God, right? And God is working to bring about, inside of us, some understanding about our need for salvation, the path to salvation, and the one who was to buy our salvation, ultimately Jesus Christ. And so, as we read the book of Genesis 100 times after that, or a dozen times after that, he was constantly hammering that into our heads. You'd fall in love with the Joseph character, and you're reading about Joseph, and you're telling stories about Joseph. But, Joseph isn't the main character in the Joseph narrative, right? It's God, caring providentially, setting things up to bring about the salvation of his people so that they could, ultimately get to the Messiah, right? And so he was just really, really smart about that. And so we get to this passage in Judges chapter 12 today, and Judges is one of those books that we fall in love with characters. Right, we just had the story of Jephthah. There was 3 chapters, 2.5 chapters about this guy named Jephthah. And there's all sorts of interesting facts about Jephthah. And we're about to have another 3 chapters about Samson, a character so interesting that they made an opera about him. They make movies about him, right? But there's this ultimately interesting character. And our eyes oftentimes fall in love with the people of the Bible. And we look for moral lessons to be gained, and we look for, be a Samson or don't be a Samson, depending on the perspective of the passage at that time, right? And what can we learn from Samson-like leadership? And we do the character studies, right? But the Bible ultimately isn't a bunch of stories about people. It's a story about God. And between Jephthah and Samson, we have 3 judges. 3 judges that you probably, outside of your, Bible reading time where you quickly pound through these 7 verses, you have never thought about since. I mean, they're virtually inconsequential. But we're going to read their stories today, and then we're going to talk about them. Judges chapter 12, starting in verse 8. This is what it says. It says, Ibzan, that's one of the judges that I'm sure you all knew about, Ibzan, who was from Bethlehem, judged Israel after Jephthah. And he had 30 sons, and he gave his 30 daughters in marriage to men outside the tribe. And he brought back 30 wives for his sons from outside the tribe. And Ibzan judged Israel for 7 years. And when he died, he was buried in Bethlehem. And then Elon, who was from Zebulun, judged Israel after Ibzan. And he judged Israel for 10 years. And when he died, he was buried in Aijalon in the land of Zebulun. And after Elon, Abdon, the son of Hillel, who was from Pirathon, judged Israel. And he had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. And Abdon judged Israel 8 years. And when he died, he was buried in Pirathon in the land of Ephraim in the hill country of the Amalekites. And then right after that, we get to Samson. So we just had 2.5 chapters about Jephthah. We just had about to have multiple chapters about Samson. And then in between it, in these 8 verses, we have 3 judges' lives condensed down to shorter than like the bare minimum obituary that you would get in the Rockdale Reporter. Right? And the reason these guys are in here, I'm fully convinced the reason these guys are in here is to make you say, what? Because, the Bible doesn't tell you everything about everything. Right? That's not what the Bible is about. It's not a book designed to answer every question that you might have about any issue. Right? The Bible is historical, like there is history in the Bible, but the Bible is not a history book. It's not written predominantly to give us history from this guy to this guy to this guy, right? It's a salvation history book about how God saved us, right? And so God elects to leave out countless people who were involved in the life of Israel in different power positions, but he did not leave out these 3 judges. If they were not in the book of Judges, you would not be poorer for it. You wouldn't mind it. It wouldn't bother you that they weren't present. You wouldn't lose any sleep that you never heard the name Ibzan, Elon. I mean, now Elon kind of matters, I guess. But Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, none of these guys would matter to you, right? Rarely do we go to this part of Judges to find names for our children, right? I've never seen any young mother like holding her unborn child and saying, you will be called Ibzan, right? Like I've not seen it. Maybe it's out there, right? We don't typically name our kids after these section of Judges. And these aren't the first judges in the book of Judges that get this treatment. Right before Jephthah, we had Tola and Jair, who got the same sort of like minuscule treatment. And early in the book of Judges, we had a guy named Shamgar, and he got the same sort of like 2-verse treatment, and he's gone. Why include these guys at all? Like, why would it be there? That is the question, like as a Bible student, just to help you with your Bible reading at home, that's the sort of question you should ask. Like you read and then like mark things that are interesting to you, right? That's what I do when I read the Bible. I'm like, hey, I didn't know that, or that's interesting, right? And when I come across things like this, where someone's name just appears out of nowhere and then they disappear just as soon as they came, the question I always ask is like, why? Why are they here? Well, and there's a few reasons, right? First of all, the theology of Judges is continued in these guys' life. The theology of Judges is basically that God delivers Israel from their sinful like position after they get to the very bottom of the spiral. And I've talked about the spiral a few times, but just in case you've missed a Sunday, here it is. Israel does well. Israel worships other gods. Not good. God gets mad at them and allows them to fall into some sort of captivity or like submission to a foreign power. And so they live under the hand of someone else, the Philistines, the Amalekites, whoever it was. They live underneath the hand of this foreign power. Then they cry out to God and say, God, save us. And then God raises up a judge, a deliverer to save them. And this judge is raised to power. He delivers them. And then Israel is back at the top, worshiping God, and life is good. But each judge doesn't remain at the same level. They kind of get worse. The character of the judges gets worse and worse and worse. And it's a spiral more than a cycle. And these 3 judges kind of continue that spiral. You see 2 of the judges at least, the first and the last, Ibzan and Abdon, both have these massive amounts of kids, right? Which we were warned about with Gideon is likely because of a harem. And these men were about concentrating power within their family and multiplying wives and trying to build this earthly kingdom. In fact, Ibzan, right, was so intent on that he had his 30 sons and his 30 daughters, and he intentionally forced them to marry people from outside of their little tribe so that the power would be even more consolidated, right? Because if 10 of my sons are married to residents of Judah, and 5 of my daughters are married to residents of Ephraim, and they're all married to other people, like there's strength because they're not going to turn on you as the leader because that's their family now. They're married into the family. They're married into your mess. And so he was looking to consolidate his power. The last guy, Abdon, like he had generational power, right? He had 40 sons or 30 sons, and then he had 40 grandsons, right? He had this kind of generations of power that came out of him, right? And it's likely trying to point out like these judges continued what had gone on before. But we don't get any of their stories. All of these men likely delivered Israel from some oppressor. We don't know who the oppressor was. We don't know what gods Israel was worshiping, right? Why don't we know any of this? Well, because God didn't want to tell you. Well, why not? Right? That's what why not? I want to know. I like good stories. Give me some battle stories. Tell me, did they come from this side? Were there people drinking like dogs in a river? Like, tell me something interesting about these stories. I need to know. I need to know more about what happened. Please tell me more. And God says, no. You don't get to know more. And in your heart, you're like, well, that's not fair. Because I want to know more. Right? And when you say that, just know like you're wrong. It is fair. And you get to know what you get to know. But why does God include these 3 dudes? I think the reason is the same reason that Dr. Klingler used green eggs and ham as an illustration there, right? It's to draw our focus off of the wrong things. The book of Judges is a tempting book to look at character studies. And a lot of these guys are like cautionary character studies. Jephthah sacrificed his daughter because he made a stupid vow. And like the character study in there is like, hey, be careful what you say to God, right? Don't be like Jephthah, right? Be faithful to your family. Don't corrupt your worship somehow like that. And there's a warning in there. And in Samson, like there's a number of cautions that we have in the Samson narrative, which we'll get to in the next couple of weeks, right? Like how to behave around women, right? Samson struggled with the ladies, right? So some of you guys out there need to take some notes from this, right? Like how do we behave around the ladies out there? How do we behave with power? What do we do when we're vested with power? How do we respond to that? And in the middle of all of that, when we start to fall in love with these people, or we just really find them interesting, God tries to draw our eyes off of that and say, it's not about any of them. Like they're really not vital. Like they matter, their stories matter, but they're not what matters. Look at me. And guys, I think a lot of times the church, we settle for looking at people instead of looking at the Lord. Like we're perfectly happy to look at the examples of people in the Bible or people outside of the Bible. And we say, I'm going to model my life like that, or I'm not going to model my life like that. And so we look at pastors and we say, like, I hope most of you know enough about me to know not to raise me up to some unnecessary pedestal because I'm not worthy of that. A lot of people look at their pastor and say, man, I want to be like that guy. He loves the Lord, loves his family. Like, I just want to be like that guy. And I do love the Lord and I do love my family. Those are true statements, okay? So just so we're clear. But when your eyes focus on the pastor or on your Sunday school teacher or on your mama or on whoever it is in your life that you admire, right? Your eyes are focused on the wrong thing. And this is a cautionary tale for us. Like it's a corrective. Like stop looking at other people. Like see God at work and then behold his work. Like we come to a church on Sunday mornings. I was talking to Ezekiel about this. He's my 4-year-old, if you don't know who he is. And like days of the week, like he struggles with like yesterday and tomorrow. Those concepts don't mean much because like yesterday was when he was 2 years old and 1 year old and 3 years old and actual yesterday All of those are yesterday. Any day that has already happened that isn't right this second, I mean, maybe earlier in the day could be yesterday even, is yesterday. And so like we struggle through some of that, but I was talking to him about, hey, we're going to church tomorrow, just to kind of like get him geeked up for coming. He enjoys going to Sunday school and church. I was like, so we're going to church tomorrow. It's the first day of the week. We go every first day of the week because that's the day Jesus rose from the grave. So that's why we go to church on the first day of the week. And I'm telling my 4-year-old this, right? And it's like, well, why aren't you instructing your 4-year-old about like why we worship on Sundays? It's because I don't want him to lose. Like, I don't want me, really, it's more about me. I don't want me to lose why we're here. Why do we get up early on the first day of the week instead of sleeping in? Why do we get up early to gather together, to sing songs, and to read Scripture, and to pray prayers together? Why do we do this thing? And it's because Christ rose from the dead on the first day of the week, and we say, I'm going to celebrate that now. Guys, our eyes easily get lost on other things, and it's programs and people and buildings and budgets, and it's I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And honestly, I think we lose a sense of the divine. Like there is a God. Right? He is fully in charge of the universe. And like our eyes need to pick up. Churches have a bad habit of navel gazing, but looking down at our belly buttons and not doing anything. We're too busy inwardly focused to do anything out in the world. But the Bible constantly is a story of God working among man, like to bring about our salvation for His glory, not for your glory, not so that because you're so awesome, but for His glory, for His name, for His fame. Right? And we got these 3 jokers that did like virtually nothing. 2 of them had a lot of kids. One of them, he didn't have a lot of kids. The only reason they think this guy like might contribute to the spiral, this Elon dude, is his name might be a pun that deals with something like wickedness. And I was like, that's not a really great thing. I don't really think I'm going to build a sermon off of that. Right? This might be a pun. Like no, pass on that. Right? These jokers, they're nobodies. I mean, they mattered. I mean, between them, they judged Israel for 25 years. Like they obviously mattered. They probably did some amazing things. But in the grand scheme of history, like they pass away because like their deeds weren't recounted. And I think part of the other reason they're in there is to remind us that this thing is very temporary that you do. Like Jephthah died, right? Immediately after Jephthah, another person comes behind him, right? And this other person comes behind him. Ibzan died. And immediately after Ibzan, another person comes behind him. Elon died. Immediately after Elon, another man rises up, right? Abdon dies, right? And it's like this constant like hammering of like, and he died, and he died, and he died, and he died, right? And there's another person behind him, and he died. There's another person behind him, and he died, right? And there's something like very, very human for us to sit on, to know like, that's our story. Like your grandma, your great-grandma, your great-great-grandma died. Wonderful people, probably, maybe. I don't know, your grandparents. I love I still have a grandma who's living. Delightful. Love the heck out of her. Right? Gifts to the world for the time that they're here. Died. One day that will be your story. And someone will come behind you, generationally behind you, right? And pick up and build off what you left behind, right? Ibzan dies. Elon picks up, judges Israel. Elon dies. Abdon picks up, judges Israel. Abdon dies. Samson picks up and judges Israel. As you were apart, like this is kind of sad, I guess. Like, but you're just one step down this path, right? And there's something like kind of tragic about that our life is ultimately going to be left to the people behind us, especially if you look at the generation behind us sometimes, and we're like, right? Like, oh my goodness, what did I do? Some of us didn't do a good job. And we look at our kids behind us and we're like, oh man, I made a mess there. Right? Some of y'all are a mess because your parents made a mess with you, right? I understand it. But it's coming. Just constant until Christ comes again. Death will just continue. And someone else is going to pick up. The question is, are they picking anything worthwhile up from you? Like, are you leaving anything behind? And it doesn't have to be just for your kids. It can be in your ministry, like in your world of worship. Right? We have a wonderful organization at our church. We don't get enough praise. They don't get enough attention. It's our Women on Mission organization. And that used to be, it was the WMU is kind of like the over thing. If you're a good Baptist, you understand what that means. If you don't, whatever. There's a national organization that's kind of like helping to encourage women to focus on missions. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, every Southern Baptist church in Texas had a thriving women's mission union. I mean, just absolutely thriving. And these women got together, and they prayed, and they studied missionaries around the world. They heard stories about what God was doing. And then they would use what was going on in that meeting to encourage this body, the gathered church body, to do something about it. Right, we have mission offerings. We'll have another one in September-ish. Is our next mission offering where we'll be given to state missions. Right, and these ladies encourage people to give to these mission offerings because they heard all year long about the pervasive lostness around the world, how we have men and women going out into harm's way, going out to the least of these and sharing the gospel, and they were compelled by that vision to push that to the church. There was a male organization next to it. The Brotherhood organization never was as impactful as the Women's Missionary Union. I feel like that's fair to say never was as impactful. Certainly isn't now or at any point in my lifetime. Then something happened. Like church changed, the dynamics inside of churches changed. And now here we are, and I think, and I could be off by one, but we are the only Southern Baptist church in the Milan Baptist Association, that's like 30 churches, 25 churches, that has anything like that going. Every single one of them did 40 years ago. What changed? Did the gospel lose its power? Did missionaries stop sharing the gospel? Is there not pervasive lostness around the world? Do we not have a way to experience that and to encourage people to study and to be compelled by the vision of lostness to go and reach those people? Like that's all there. And the WMU is still putting out generally good material to encourage people to read and to study and to learn about these things. What happened was we stopped caring. And that next generation, after those church mothers who were here 40 years ago, when I've been here 8 years now, and when I got here, I did a funeral for Eugenia Newton. I hadn't been here 3 months and did Miss Newton's funeral. And Wallace, the funeral home, pulled me aside and he said, "Matt, you don't know this, but there used to be a row of ladies, and over the last 4 years, we've buried all of them from your church." And I know some of these names because these are women who mattered in the life of the church, so their stories have come back to me, right? But those ladies did enough to pass on something. And so we still have this thing, and it's not as strong as it should be. And I tell you this, ladies, if you're free on the first and third Wednesdays, it's in the morning. I'm not lying to you. We need you to be a part of it. We need you to catch the vision for what God is doing around the world. It doesn't just have to be for our 65 and up people. There's a vision there that young ladies could enjoy to grab a hold of. And if we need to help find other meeting times because you work or whatever, we can talk about that. But those ladies did enough to pass that on. But in every other church across our county, it just died. Right? When they died, that vision died. And that's tragic. When I think about that, about my ministry here. One day I will be gone, whether God calls me to another church or I have a heart attack and die in the pulpit here. Like, one day I'll be gone. And someone else, this church will be 150 years old next year. Like, someone else is going to stand up, like in this general spot in this room, and fulfill the role that I have. And I want to leave them like a path forward to do good things. Like, I don't want to leave them a mess and garbage, and because, like I lost the vision for what it is that we're supposed to be doing as a church. And it's not just about the pastor, it's about your ministry, your area of service, what God has called you to do. Right? Because you're going to die. Right? Short of Jesus coming back, and Lord, I'm all about Christ coming today. I'm ready. Short the sudden, certain return of Jesus Christ, like your day is going to come. Who's behind you to pick up what you have? Who's going to step up behind you to pick up what you have? Are you helping to lead people that way? Because that's one of the things this story reminds me of. It's just over and over again. But as churches and as people, we can become inwardly focused. We focus on just making it through the day, managing our problems, our crises, our conflicts, our issues today. And then when our day comes and we're no more, we've never done anything to look up to prepare anybody for what's coming. And if you've been in that spot and you've done that before, guys, it's time. If you have a ministry, if you have a service area, pick your eyes up off of just doing it and look who you can help to train to do it behind you. We're a blessed church, genuinely blessed church. I mean this with everything in me. We have generations in our church. That's rare. It's rare to have 90-year-olds and 9-day-olds in the same church. Right? Churches get young, churches get old. I remember I was driving through McKinney, Texas, and there was a church that basically said, we only want old people at our church. They didn't say that exactly, but it was like, basically, like anything that's contemporary in the church is sinful. Like, it was on their billboard. Like we don't do any of that nonsense. You won't see a drum set in our church. You won't hear a praise chorus in our church. We don't do any of that nonsense. And I guarantee if you walk into that church, it's going to be 95%, whatever. I don't know what the break line is. Right? That's who they want to be. And then the church is the exact opposite. Right? You go to any town, any emerging little city, you go to some church plant, and all they want are the prices and below. Y'all are like the old side. We only want the prices and below. Yeah. Like, that's all we want. You're 30 and under. If you're over 30, we're like, I don't know if I can trust you, right? That was the old saw, right? That's all they have. They have no wisdom above them. The pastor is the oldest guy in the room, and he's 27. Right? Like, they have no wisdom of generations. They have nothing above them. And they're impoverished for it. Guys, we are a blessed church. But guys, we have to pass down what we have. If you've got a ministry, you've got a service, you've got a class, you've got a thing that you do, get your eyes off of it for just a second. Pick your eyes up off of it. Look at what God is trying to do through it and with it. No, it's not about you. And bring other people in. Guys, there's people out there. Just pick your eyes up. I'm so thankful for those of you who have served. Some of you have been serving this church longer than I've been alive. Praise God for you. Praise God for you. I'm not telling you to stop. Don't stop. Bring someone along with you. Grab that next generation by the hand and say, I want you to come with me. Find someone passionate about the same thing you're passionate about. Set them in the room with you while you make decisions to do things forward. There's something about that in the New Testament, right? Older women train younger women. Older men train younger men. There's something in there. Maybe we'd do better if we did it. These guys, these three judges, right? They're nobodies. Right? But they tell us to pick our eyes up off of ourselves, to look at what God is doing, because the story is God's story. And that matters in your life today as well. And also, additionally, your story has a stop. It's going to end. You may judge for 7, you may judge for 10, you may judge for 8, you may rule for 40, you may rule for 70. There's going to come a day when your day will meet and you will die. What's left behind you? Leave a legacy behind you, church family. Find the people behind you you can raise up. Children, youth, young adults. Find people underneath you. Invest in them today. Let's pray.